When World War II ended in 1945, the Americans and British were quick to apprehend and put to work German and Japanese scientists, including those who had conducted human experimentation in the development of new chemical and biological warfare weapons. Though responsible for terrible suffering and mass deaths in Nazi concentration camps and in the infamous Japanese Unit 731 facility, most of these men never saw the inside of a courtroom. Why? Because their knowledge and research were of high value in a new war, the Cold War, as America and Britain scrambled to develop hideous new weapons to counter the Soviet threat, the Soviets, of course, doing exactly the same. In 2012, I wrote a book called The Devil's Doctors, proving that Japanese scientists had even used American, British, and Australian POWs in bioweapons warfare experiments, and that this data had later been used by British and American scientists post-war, regardless of morality issues. My research in Britain's National Archives also showed that much of this information remains classified to this day, with relevant files retained by the government. Since 1945, a long program of human experimentation has been going on in Britain, a program that most people don't know about, centered on a top-secret research facility in the heart of the English countryside. The British first experimented with chemical weapons in 1916 at the height of the First World War, when the Royal Engineers Experimental Station was established at Porton Down, on land slightly northeast of the small village of Porton, near Salisbury in Wiltshire. Porton Down has remained a nerve centre of British chemical and biological warfare research ever since. Today it houses the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, an executive agency of the Ministry of Defence, the MOD, and an above top-secret institution spread over a very carefully monitored 7,000 acres of English countryside. Within Porton Down is also located the Health Protection Agency's Centre for Emergency Preparedness and Response, as well as a small science park. To the northwest is the MOD Boscombe Down Test Range facility. During the First World War, the scientists at Porton Down created chlorine, phosgene, and mustard gas for offensive use. During the Second World War, there was considerable research into chemical weapons, for example, nitrogen mustard, as well as biological weapons, including anthrax and botulinum toxin. In 1942, very successful anthrax tests were carried out using bioweapons at Grenard Island in Scotland. The British were concerned about the possible effects of anthrax on population centres should the Germans have decided to use such weapons. 80 sheep were taken to the 76-square-mile uninhabited island and exposed to a particularly virulent strain of anthrax developed at Oxford University. All of the animals soon died. Grenard Island was so badly polluted by anthrax that it was placed under an indefinite quarantine and only declared safe in 1990 after the government had mounted an extensive clean-up operation, which included the removal of the topsoil from the island. In another notorious case, between 1963 and 1975, defence scientists sprayed live bacteria from a ship in Lyme Bay, Dorset, to simulate an anthrax attack. The wind carried the bacteria, which was potentially dangerous to people, to the town of Weymouth. In the 1990s, when word of these experiments got out, several local councils demanded investigations into the possible health effects, but the government refused to hold a public inquiry. After the war ended, the scientists at Porton Down conducted research into recently discovered Nazi nerve agents, which included tabun, sarin, and soman. By 1952, the British made a major breakthrough when they developed VX gas, an extremely lethal nerve agent. Considerable work was undertaken on defensive measures, including the rapid detection and decontamination of chemical and biological warfare agents. Voluntary human tests were conducted, and there have been consistent allegations of unethical human experiments at Porton Down. The issue of exactly how voluntary the tests were has been raised by support groups who have campaigned for greater transparency and proper answers after the deaths of loved ones at the facility. The most prominent case to have come to public attention was the death of 20-year-old RAF leading aircraftman Ronald Madison in 1953, after he was exposed to the sarin nerve agent as part of a toxicity test. Madison, from County Durham, was one of around 3,400 post-war volunteers who submitted themselves to chemical weapons tests at Porton Down. It remains a very controversial episode in the history of British weapons research, with many of the men who took part later claiming that they were tricked into it by the military and have suffered long-term health issues as a result of the experiments, a situation that is not dissimilar to the claims made by some of the American and British survivors of Japanese POW camps where medical research was undertaken during the war. The test that killed Madison on the 6th of May 1953 involved him and 4 other volunteers sitting inside a gas chamber wearing respirators. Each man had a cloth draped over one of his arms, which had been impregnated with 200 milligrams of sarin. Sarin gas is described as an organophosphorus compound, a colorless, odorless liquid that has been classified as a weapon of mass destruction by the United Nations. Since 1993, the Chemical Weapons Convention has outlawed the production and stockpiling of sarin. Discovered by accident in Germany in 1938 by scientists who were trying to create stronger pesticides, sarin has twice come to the attention of the media when it has been used as a weapon. In March 1988, Saddam Hussein unleashed a 2-day sarin attack on the Kurdish city of Halabja in northern Iraq, killing around 5,000 of the city's 70,000 inhabitants. And in 1995, a religious sect in Japan released an impure form of sarin on the Tokyo Underground Railway system, killing 13 people and injuring dozens more. Within 20 minutes of beginning the test Ronald Madison had been told was to cure the common cold, he complained of feeling unwell. He then collapsed to the floor and began to convulse. Scientists immediately removed him from the chamber, took off his respirator, and injected him with atropine before he was rushed by ambulance to a nearby medical facility where he died. The sarin had blocked the flow of air into Madison's lungs, starving his brain and body of oxygen. An inquiry was immediately launched, but it was held in secret. On the 16th of May 1953, the death of Madison was declared to have been misadventure. It was reported that the Ministry of Defence secretly paid Madison's funeral expenses. However, that was not the end of the story. In July 1999, Wiltshire Constabulary, the police force that covers the area where Porton Down is located, launched Operation Antler in an attempt to investigate the extent of malfeasance that had been committed at Porton Down over the decades since the Second World War. Altogether, the police found that Porton Down had employed around 20,000 men as human guinea pigs before, during, and after the Second World War. The police interviewed 700 surviving veterans, many of whom claimed to have been tricked into signing up for the service volunteer program. When Madison died in 1953, the MOD paid each volunteer 15 shillings, the equivalent of about £25 today, and threw in a 3-day pass. It was a measly sum of money for the risks to life and limb that were involved. By 2004, Wiltshire Constabulary had drawn up 25 cases for possible prosecution and eventually forwarded 8 to the Crown Prosecution Service. Unfortunately, the CPS decided that none of the scientists involved in the experiments at Porton Down would be prosecuted, and the cases were closed. The MOD agreed to pay the Madison family £100,000 compensation in 2006 after a fresh inquest into the young airman's death returned a verdict of unlawful acts in 2004. Eventually, in 2008, the Ministry of Defence paid out £3 million in compensation to 360 veterans of human experimentation at Porton Down, but interestingly refused to admit any liability. Research into chemical and biological warfare in Britain continues to the present day, but it remains highly secret. Even members of Parliament have been denied information about what goes on at Porton Down. One Conservative Member of Parliament, Colonel Patrick Mercer, recalled his own experience of the place when he was a young army officer. Quote, "It was hideous, a hutted camp where it seemed to do nothing but rain. There were a series of bunkers to which you were thrust from time to time to be gassed with CS gas, and to go through ghastly exercises underground wearing a gas mask." End quote. Many veterans have spoken of strange experiments that they were a part of. Quote, "As far as we were all concerned, the tests were part of a program searching for a cure for the common cold," recalled former Fleet Air Arm storeman Eric Hatherall. It would be surprising to find a military establishment spending its budget on such a research project with no military potential. Quote, "If I had thought that it was anything more than that, I would not have put my name forward," said Hatherall. "They gave each of us a glass of water, and we were told to drink it, which I did, and I felt no adverse symptoms. It tasted like water to me, but some of the others who had taken the drink literally started trying to climb the wall and cowering in corners. They were screaming and hallucinating, and saying there were giant spiders in the room. It is now pretty obvious that they had been given LSD or another drug." End quote. One thing known for certain is the very large scale of animal testing conducted at Porton Down. For example, the MOD reported in 2009 that there were 8,168 what they called procedures conducted against animals at the facility. Pigs are routinely used for blast tests of explosives and other weapons to help develop personal protection equipment for frontline troops. Mice are used in the development of vaccines for microbial and viral infections, and various types of monkeys have been exposed to anthrax. This is only a sample of the types of experiments that are conducted at Porton Down and of the species of animals used. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe and share, and visit my video channel, Mark Felton Productions. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.